Hello everyone and welcome. I am super excited about making this video and I must apologize because I've been sitting on this one for years. This is completely legit, no joke, defrosted to perfected in less than an hour. There's also just a ton of great advantages to this recipe, so stay tuned. And that's why I feel like I've sat on it. I think there's just a whole lot of people that would have loved to have this a bit sooner. I want to start by pulling back the curtain of sorts because it's not exactly a magic trick and it's really obvious, but it is kind of sort of a magic trick, right? Because a lot of people don't really do it. So the trick is to carve the turkey when it's raw. And that's going to allow you to deal with each piece individually, right? So when you're cooking it, you can cook both sides to it and you don't have the carcass interfering with the heat distribution, so it can cook a lot quicker. You also get the flexibility to work with each piece. So if you wanted to, pan fry some or just oven roast another, brine some, don't brine some, freeze some, whatever you wanted to do, that's an option. It gives you full access to the whole of the meat if you do want to season it or do something there. So that's really good too. But logistically, I think is really where I find it most helpful. On top of the quick cooking time, you can just work with it in the kitchen a lot easier. It's just a lot easier to work with, especially the larger birds in pieces, comparatively to having to do everything, including if you're going to store it, defrosting it, things like that. If you're going to do anything with the bird later, it really helps to be dealing with the pieces instead of everything at once. And I've got to do the quick shameless plug for the bone broth recipe here. That's right, folks. Bone broth. You're going to see how easy it is to make delicious, nutritious, from scratch bone broth with this recipe. And how is it a shameless plug? Because it is a wonderful thing to have if you're doing keto style or prolonged fasting, dieting. And hey, guess what? I just wrote a wonderful book on prolonged fasting. It's got a ton of great information that would apply to general dieting and keto and a whole bunch of other stuff. So definitely check that out if you're interested and you're looking for anything new or different or just for information and some great discussions on dieting in general. And just in case it needs to be said, you can defrost the turkey any which way you like. That said, it's not recommended from a food safety perspective, but if you're using this method for the quick cook reasons and you need to defrost the turkey as soon as possible, and do remember you can get a fresh turkey if that's in your budget and you have it available. But if you need to defrost a turkey as quick as possible, put it in lukewarm water, preferably in a big cooler with as much water accessible as possible to give it more surface area, more water to come to temp more quickly. And rotate the water about every 30 minutes or so. That should get it the quickest. Again, that isn't recommended from a food safety perspective, but if you're in a real bind, that'll get the job done. So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set the oven to a broil. That's the other part of this recipe that is going to enable that fast cooking. And this is going off of a legit Alton Brown recommended technique. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later in the recipe. But if you've never done it, yes, going to be using a broil to help quickly cook and seal in the juices in the turkey. And this method is even better when we're cooking it already carved because then we're going to do both sides. We're going to get more coverage. So more juice is sealed in, more time reduction in cooking, and it's going to help really get that very nice, perfect golden brown, well cooked, juicy turkey that we're looking for. The goal is to just place these pieces around in a roasting pan to help them cook as evenly and as deliciously as possible. So my recommendation, and we'll go into a little bit of this in a minute, is to put them skin side, fat side down on the pan with the thickest pieces on the outside. A roasting pan is very beneficial, but not completely necessary. So the roasting pan can help keep those drippings and juices separate from the meat, which just helps in general, helps keep things cleaner, can help get some of the crisp on the outside a little bit better. But again, not 100% necessary. The big thing you need to make sure of is that whatever pan that you're using can handle a broil, because not all can. And this recipe is going to do a broil for a substantial amount of time, so you want to make sure that your pan can definitely handle that broil. That said, this is one of the reasons why we are going to be doing fat side down at first, because having that fat side down on that grate just helps keep things a little bit nicer while both sides are forming up. It gives this first pass some time to form up that top, so either it's not pressing on the grate and it's not going to get real messy in the juices if those are first starting to come out. So that's why we're doing fat side down. The first piece that we're going to carve is the breast, because that leaves the leg and the wing there so it can help stabilize the bird while we are carving the breast. And first thing to do is to just separate the leg from the breast. This is just going to make it easier so that it's once and done here as soon as we finish carving around the sternum on the rest of the breast. So find the sternum and you want to hold your blade and trace down the back of it, and you don't need to push too hard. You don't need to get everything. You can clean this up and cook this on the side later, so you're not wasting if you don't. But just slide it down that sternum as best that you can. Get as much on that breast in a single piece as you can. Cut down the sides and then follow it to the bottom, and you should be able to cut a nice clean piece, and there you go. This is where if you weren't cooking it right away, you can place it in a bag or container and then brine it or freeze it or do whatever. But for right now, place it face down in that roasting pan and we'll move on to the next pieces. The legs and the wings can be a little bit more difficult than the breast, because you do have to twist the bones and pop them out of their joint before you can fully remove them. So that can be a little bit more difficult at times, but if you get the knack of it, it's usually not too difficult. So you just twist. Sometimes you can get it with just one twist, sometimes you need a few. But basically, keep on cutting around that joint if it doesn't pop within one or two twists. But once it does, again, you can take that blade, just cut right through the middle, and you should be good to go. Carving the wings is just about the same as carving the legs. You're going to take the knife and cut around the joint as much of the meat and skin as possible, as close to the carcass as possible. You're going to go around that a couple times, cutting what you can, and then give that wing a couple of twists. You should hear a pop after a couple twists, but if not, just keep working with the knife at the skin and the meat around the joint. Give it another twist, cut again, and it should pop and come off, and then you've got your last piece of the turkey. The carcass is just about ready for the stock pot to make the bone broth, but if you want, you can take this and you can cut off some of those big chunks of meat off the carcass. There can be some left when you're cutting the breast, but there are usually a couple of big chunks you can get off from the bottom as well. And you don't have to do this, but this will clean up the broth a little bit. And it's also some good chunks of meat to work with if you're going to do a side dish or anything. You want a little piece of turkey, like if you're doing soups and such. These are some great pieces. So do that now if you want. Not 100% necessary, but something I do like to do. Once you get that carcass cleaned up as much as you decide you're going to, you can either throw it away right then and there, but I highly encourage you to make a from scratch bone broth. It is delicious and nutritious. So we're going to proceed on making that bone broth. Again, get that carcass started in a large stock pot, fill it up with water just above the bones. This isn't a critical amount. It's just if you are going to reduce it and want it to thicken it up later, the more water that you put in now is going to increase the time that you need to reduce it later. So you can always add water later. So for now, just an inch or so above the bones, and start to bring that to a low or medium boil. And it is time for the first round in the oven. So it is a broil, and a lot of times it's not exactly a big deal if you go and you put in whatever dish or meat you're working with a little bit early. But in this case, it is do wait till it is fully preheated to a broil. Because the purpose of the broil is to seal in these juices, and if it's not at a broil when you start, then it can warm up a little bit and you can lose some of those juices and kind of defeat the purpose of the broil. So do make sure it's at broil before you put it in. And it's going to be about 1 minute per pound and fat side down. After the turkey has finished round one, it is time to pull it out of the oven for a second. All that you're going to do is you're going to flip it. So now we're going to put it fat side up. So that meat should have firmed up a little bit, and this is going to allow us to put this, now on the downside. So if you weren't using a roasting pan, it might be sitting in some juices. And now that it's firmed up a little bit on that side, it's not going to be as messy. You're still going to have that nice kind of firmness and skin on the outside. Um, but on the grate, it should be just fine. You should also notice that there's not going to be a whole lot of juices at this point, and that's what you want to see with this method, because the whole purpose is to seal those in. So if you see a lot of juices on the bottom, maybe the oven didn't get cooked up to temp. Maybe there were some holes poked in it or something like that that's letting out those juices while it's cooking. So think about that. But in this method, there should not be a whole lot of juice on the bottom of the pan that you're using to cook it. And after the turkey finishes round two, that is the last round of broil in the oven. So you're going to go ahead and turn the oven down to 375 degrees. It can be bake or roast, it doesn't really matter. The key here is we're just going to try to finish off. It should be cooked very well enough on the outside. You should see some crisp golden brownness on the outside. If you don't, you can keep it on the broil a little bit longer, but put it down to 375. You can take it out and let the oven cool down. You can keep it in. It really doesn't matter. The whole point is just to finish this off, and broils a little bit too much at this point. So just do whatever is going to finish it off the best. If you think it might be a little bit on the cook side, then go ahead and take it out and let the oven cool down. If you think it needs a little bit extra, then keep it in while it's cooling down and give it a little bit extra heat. But this is going to continue to be fat side up. And if you want, you can use the meat thermometers at this point instead of judging it by time. I personally don't like to. I think I can get it good enough and regular enough, and I'm not really worried about having undercooked meat myself. And I think it helps keep it even juicier because you're not poking it at all and no juices are coming out. But if you do want to have that extra food safety notch, or you do want to make it right to temp, then yes, at this point, go ahead and stick in those meat thermometers and cook it straight up to 165 degrees. The quickest way you can ruin an otherwise perfectly good cut of meat is to cut it open before it rests appropriately. Now, in the case of thicker cuts of meat and with a good sized turkey, I think 15 to 30 minutes is going to be good. At least 15, 30 minutes if you want to serve it fresh, and that's a little bit better for presentation if you've got everyone over in the meal, and you want to start, cutting into it right afterwards. That's great, but I actually do prefer it for taste and exactness to let it fully rest. In other words, let it cool down completely. We're talking hours. And if you do that, it'll fully rest. You can warm it back up. Again, it might not be as much as a to do or presentation if you're having people over, but that way you can make sure those juices fully seal back up. Then you can warm it up exactly to the temp that you want, and it helps you get that exactness with making sure it is as juicy as possible. After the turkey has fully rested, you can now pull the wing and the leg bones out of the meat and add it to the bone broth stock pot if you want. This is just going to make, whether it be a thicker or just more volume of bone broth, you don't have to do this, but this is something that's really nice to do to expand the quantity and the quality of bone broth that you're going to get. So yeah, so go ahead and pull those, make sure that they're nice and cool so you're not burning your hands. Throw them right in the pot. It doesn't really matter if they're going to be like 6 hours plus behind or any number of hours behind. I do typically cook my bone broth for 24 hours. It's typically the length I like to go, but especially if you're doing, at least 12 to 18 hours, if you're adding those bones in late, that would be a good idea, but it's going to give you a richer or just more volume of broth, and it is something that you should definitely take advantage of with this recipe. There should be enough drippings for at least one batch of gravy, but if you were looking forward to a lot of gravy with this meal, be prepared. If you have some drippings or some extra stock that you made in advance from prior batches, that's great. You can move forward. If you were planning on having the doing the broth in advance, right? That's great. You can do that, but this really does reduce those drippings. So if you don't have stock or drippings on hand, be prepared for that and either have some extra from prior batches or have some store bought ready. To finish off the bone broth, all that you need to do is just continue to let it go at a low boil for a total of 12 to 24 hours. This is independent of if you put in the extra bones or not. The cook time is just going to be how much you're extracting out of the bones that you put in there. You also may want to take some time to reduce this depending on how thick you want it. Because this is a natural bone broth, those wonderful nutrients, including the collagen, are going to come out, and so it will gelify if you reduce it and it cools down adequately. So be prepared for that. But this is a very easy, nutritious, delicious bone broth that you can make. There are a lot of ways that you can fancy it up. You can clear it up and thin it out, etc. But look those up on your own if you want to do that. Otherwise, it's really simple. Just keep the bones going for 12 to 24 hours, and then you can strain it after it's cooled down. So there you have it, folks. From defrosted to perfected in just 1 hour. And of course, it does vary on the size of the bird a little bit, but anything that's around a 20-pound bird, you should be able to do this in less than an hour. This, of course, does not include the extras like the bone broth because I'm obviously recommending cooking that for up to about 24 hours. But there you go, folks. So let's recap the whole recipe real quick. First, you're going to defrost it any way that you like. You can defrost it in lukewarm water if you want a quick defrost and you're really in a rush. Carve into the breast, the legs, and the wings. Bring to a broil for 1 minute per pound, starting with the fat side down. After it broils, you're going to continue cooking it fat side up for 30 seconds per pound at 375, and you can use your thermostats here if you want to cook it to temp as well. After it finishes cooking, let it rest for at least 15 minutes. We're taking all this effort to seal in those juices, so please don't cut it early and let it all drain out. At least 15 minutes, maybe 30. You can even let it cool for hours and warm it up after the fact. Optional if you're going to cook your carcass scraps, your gravy, your bone broth, anything you're going to do, and then back to some mandatory enjoyment here. So there you have it, folks. Hope you enjoyed this recipe. Happy holidays, Thanksgiving, and remember, you can use this delicious, wonderful, nutritious turkey recipe all throughout the year. So do enjoy it, do use it. I hope you liked it. Happy holidays and take care. Much love and many blessings on your journey.